In this tutorial series, we're going to be going over how to use React, Kotlin, and Spring Boot in order to make a full stack web to-do list. So you'll be able to see your active to-dos, your completed to-dos, add them, and make changes to them, such as deleting them and marking them as complete. You can refresh the page automatically and also add new to-dos. This is a disclaimer before watching this video. So this is going to go over a specific REST API framework with a specific front-end framework. So if this is not what you're looking for, then maybe this is not the video for you. So remember that everything described in this video is not only in the title, but also in the description of this course. So if we're not using the framework that you want, or if this is information that you've already watched before, then we ask that maybe this is a video that you should avoid. Now, if this is something that you want to learn, such as building a to-do list with these technologies, then go right ahead, because we are welcome to all of our students. But just remember that everything about this course is in the title and the description. So from there, let's continue on to building our RESTful API and building our front-end application. We'll want to install the OpenJDK locally on our computer to run Java projects. So one of the easiest ways to do this is using adopt.jdk. You can find this at adopt.jdk.net. And I like to use long-term stability versions. These are very stable and aren't most likely to change, and they're also supported for several years. So we'll use version 11, and in the future this might be bumped up to version 16, but for now we'll be using version 11, and we'll choose our JVM, our Java Virtual Machine. I just stick with the first option and I download it. You'll have a downloader. This may take a few minutes. Because I already have this downloaded, I will cancel this, and I will go here, and I'll see that Java is installed. I'll do java -- version, and I'll see that I have the OpenJDK 11 installed on my computer. In this tutorial, we're going to be using JetBrains IDE. Just because it's an easier tool to use for Java development than Visual Studio Code. So when it comes to Java and Kotlin development, I tend to stick with IntelliJ. You can get this by downloading it. You can purchase a monthly or yearly subscription, which is not required because you can do the free trial. You can use the early access program. But for this course, this is the IDE we'll be using because there's a lot of database tools that don't come with other IDEs. Now, you can do some of the same stuff with Visual Studio Code, but you have to do it manually. And typically when you're on the job, companies want you to do things fast and get it done right. And sometimes it's not worth trying to do everything manually and making a mistake. You want to make sure that your whole workflow is progressing the application as fast as possible so you can get it out to your clients. And I would recommend IntelliJ. Now, this is not a sponsorship. I don't make anything by using this. This is just a tool that I've been using as a Java developer. And it just makes things so much easier. Like, things that would take me 30 minutes, I can do it within a couple minutes. And that's the key point. Just getting things out there and getting things up and running and not having to configure things every single time, which really saves a lot of developers a headache. And as a developer, you want to save time in order to get the app out as soon as possible and make sure that it works properly. So I would recommend getting this application. You can do the early access program, which is a great program. And in exchange for sending bug reports, you get to use their IDE, which is awesome. So in order to start using Spring Boot with Kotlin, we're going to have our Spring initializer. So let's create an application called to-do, and let's put this in the to-do folder. We're going to have our language set to Kotlin, and we're going to have grading. We're not going to use Maven because I typically find the XML files to be very difficult to read. Some people like them, but they're very old school. Gradle is more like a Java-esque or JavaScript-esque language. It's really easy to read. You don't have to worry about opening and closing tags and stuff like that. A lot of things can be done through one-liners. It's amazing. And here we're going to do com.codebrains. We're going to have our artifact to do, our package name, com.codebrains.todo, and we're going to have our project SDK. I have the adopt open JDK 11. You can download different versions, but I'm using version 11. So that's the version of Java I'm running on my computer. I have Java 11, and my packaging is a jar. So the next thing I want to do is in the web dependencies. Let's see what version of Spring Boot that I'll be using. I'll actually just be using 2.5.5. It's stable. I'll use Spring Web. That's a good one. And for SQL, I'll be using Spring Data JPA. I'll also be using Flyaway Migrations. And I'll also be using the Postgres SQL driver. So these are the tools that I'll be using. Let's see. Are there any other dependencies that I would need? So let's check here one last time. Web, JPA, Flyaway, and Postgres. So there shouldn't be anything else that we need. And we can hit finish. And let's terminate this. So it will build our project. We have our Flyaway migrations. It's currently building the project folder out. One last thing, let's just make sure in our settings and our plugins, we have JPA Buddy. This is very important. We'll be using this very heavily in this project, so make sure that if you don't have it already, you have JPA Buddy. Awesome, so we've created our project. Everything seems to be running fine. Let's look through our source directory. We have our Kotlin folder and so on. Perfect. Let's start off by setting up our database configuration. So with our database, we'll go to main, resources. We'll see that there's a DB migrations folder, and we'll create those migrations later. But for now, what we'll do is Spring data source. Let's see, URL. You won't set that URL right now. We'll do spring.data source. Username, we'll set this to Postgres. Spring.data source. And set this to password. Password will be CodeBrains, Spring.data source. We'll set this to Postgres. Next, what we'll do is our database connections. Create a new database connection. And let's set this to PostgreSQL. Let's say localhost. This is my port number, but it might not be the one that you're using. So what's the name of this database? We'll set this to Kotlin to do. Make sure that's the one that I have set up here. Kotlin to do. And Postgres. Let me test this connection. Okay, it works. So I know that this URL works. And what I'll do is in my application properties, I'll paste that there. So my Spring data source URL. Also, I want to set my server.port and I'll set this to 8081. I'll save this. I can now see my database over here, and I'm connected, which is great. Let's start by adding some entities. So what we're going to do is we're going to create a new package name, and let's call this entities. Awesome. So now that we have that, we're going to create an entities of to do. Let's go here, new JPA entity, and this is a project. This is a Kotlin file, and we'll choose the language of Kotlin. Do to do entity type. All right, awesome. I'll turn this off. So this is an open class. Now I ran into some issues in the past, so I tend to get rid of this. Let's add an ID. Let's change the strategy to identity. Awesome. And I'm not going to make this open, just because sometimes people run into issues with this. So let's add another basic type. Let's call this a title. It's going to be string. Get rid of this open again. And let's say another basic type of, I'll say completed. And don't make this a string. You want to make this boolean. So, and change this to false. You want the default to be false. And remove this. Okay. Save. Awesome. Now we're going to want to come down here and create. Actually, let's do this. Let's create a repository first. So JPA repository to do repository, and we have a class. So we have our interface. We're good to go. Now we'll also want to create a migration. So we'll do a diff version migration, and we'll have our model as well as our DB. So this is the DB connection that we set up previously, and we'll create that. This may take a few seconds. So it creates a to-do table where you have your ID, title, completed, so on. This is awesome. So we'll save that. Awesome. Now that we have our entities and our migrations, we'll actually create a controller. So let's create a new package. Let's see here, package, controllers, and we'll create a new Kotlin class. Let's name this to-do controller. One of the first things we'll want to do is add Rust controller. Let's also add request mapping. Let's set this to to-dos. Now, one thing we'll want to do is allow for us to access our to-do repository. So let's say val to-do repository, and do repository, and let's say this is a to-do repository. Also, what we'll want to do is test out creating our to-dos. So let's create a post mapping. And let's say we'll have a function new to do. And we'll have a request body to do to do. We'll return a to do. And let's see. Return to do repository. Save. And we'll have the to do. Let's save this and test this out. Go to our Gradle commands, application, boot run. The initial build might take a while. All right, let's go to Insomnia and go to our Kotlin API. Let's say add to do, and we've created a to do. If we go to Postgres here, and let's go to schemas, public, our tables, you have our to do table. Awesome. Let's create a couple more to dos. Add another to do as an ID of 2, and add third to do. Awesome. So we've created 3 to dos now. So we've tested it and things look to be working fine. Now that we can add our to dos, let's actually start off by getting our to dos. Let's stop this and let's create a git mapping. Git mapping. And we'll have a function. Let's call it get to dos. We'll do to do repository, find all. Now that's a one-liner. Now another thing that we'll do is, and let's actually see what this is. Perfect. Declare as type effort. We actually won't worry about this. Let's do another git mapping. And let's say to do ID. We'll do function get to do. we'll have our path variable. This path variable will be also to do ID. And let's see, we'll have to do ID and have it as type long. We'll also have optional to do, and let's see what the issue is here. We want to return our to do by doing find by ID and to do ID. Let's save this. So we have both get mappings for getting all of our to-dos and getting the to-do by ID. Let's run this in Gradle with boot run. We'll go back to Insomnia. Let's get all of these to-dos. Awesome. And let's try to get one by its ID. Let's get another one by its ID. All right, works perfectly fine. Now that we can get all of our to-dos, let's see if we can update our to-dos based on its ID. So let's have a put mapping. So let's do put mapping, and we'll say to do ID, and we'll name this function update to do. This function will take a path variable and let's say to do ID. Our to do ID will be of type long. We'll also want to take in a request body of our updated to do, and this will also be of type to do. So the next thing we're going to do is get the to do. So get the old to do. Find by ID or null. If old to do equals null, we'll just return the old to do. Otherwise, we'll do return to do repository dot save updated to do. So let's save this and run. Let's update. So we've now modified this. And we've set this to true, and we've set a duplicate. Add a to-do, add to-do. So in the next video, we'll talk about actually deleting these to-dos. Now that we can update our to-dos, say for instance we make a mistake, we no longer need a to-do, we can delete it. So let's go here and create a new function. We'll create a delete mapping. This delete mapping will take the to-do ID and let's say function delete to-do, and all we need is the path variable, and let's have that as a to-do ID. And have that to-do ID as long. Because we've done this so many times, IntelliJ recognizes exactly what we want to do. Now we'll do a to-do repository dot delete by ID. And we have the to-do ID that we've passed in there. Save that. Run this. And once this is finished building, we should be able to delete our to-dos. Go here, delete a to-do. Go by all of our to-dos. Boom, there we go. Awesome. So now that we're finished with our API, we can focus on building the front end of this. So see you in the next video. Now that we have our REST API running, one of the key things that we're going to want to do is create a new React application. So let's do this here. We'll do npx create React app, and let's name this React to-dos. So this will take a few minutes to install, depending on your network speed, and npm is notoriously slow. This will download the packages, but I guess it seems for me that this installed fairly fast. Now, while that is installing, let's take a look at the UI framework that we'll be using. We'll be using Ant Design. Ant Design is a really cool UI framework, and it integrates really well with Create React App, and has some awesome components that you can use. So it has everything from buttons to pagination to date pickers, forms, and input, and we'll be using some of these common features. So let's check on our application. It's still installing. After the several minutes of the initially long install of React, what we'll do is we'll cd into it, cd React, and after that, we'll actually install Ant. So let's go here, and you can do this with npm. So install. And I hate that they recommend that you install yarn, but you can use yarn add, or you can just do this. npm install ant d save. And you really don't have to use -- save. That's just a carryover from older versions of npm, but now it automatically saves it to your package.json file. This will also take a few minutes, but after this, we don't have to worry about installing any more dependencies. And now that we have Ant Design installed, let's actually add it to our project. So one of the key things that we'll want to do is we'll import Ant. So in our app.cs file, we'll do this. We will open this in Visual Studio. Go to the source file. And let me remove all of this. Add this file and test it out by removing all of these. And importing, let's see, we'll import a button from Ant Design. We'll do npm start, run this app on port 3000. The initial build always takes a while. So this may take a few seconds. But trust me, this is literally the longest part of this tutorial because you're building everything and pulling everything down. So don't be concerned if things take you a few minutes for your first setup of this project. React applications are notoriously slow for their initial build. And we have our button, which works great. Let's inspect it. And it's a button tag with a span in the middle. Awesome. So we have Ant Design installed. In the next video, we can start building out this application. Cool. Now that we've created our React application, let's actually set out the file structure. So I'll actually create two folders called services and another folder called components. So both of these will be in the source folder. Inside of our services folder, we'll create a new JS file. And let's name this to do service.js. Awesome. Now in our components, we'll have all of the components we need for our application. And I just started the React application, but let's go back here. We have our new file. Let's name this to do form.jsx. I want this to be a JSX file. Another one will be, let's name this to do item.jsx. Another one will be to do list.jsx. And let's have a CS file accompany that. So to do list.css. And let's have one more. We'll add some tabs to this. So let's do to do tab.jsx. So that's going to be the basic structure of our application. In the next few videos, we'll start creating each of these files. So for part one of building out this service, we're going to have our base URL. So let's start off with a constant of base URL. And recently, I just changed the endpoint for this REST API. So I'm going to set this to localhost and change this to port 8000 and to-dos. So, but you can change this to whatever you want. So it doesn't necessarily have to be this. You can also use process.env variables, which is pretty awesome. If you go to, let's say, for instance, if you create a .env file, you don't have to do this, but sometimes this is easier, especially when deploying .env. You can actually set this in your env file. So I think it's like React underscore app underscore API underscore URL. And you can change this to something like HTTP localhost and 8000. Save that. And if you go back to your services, you can create a template string and just do something like let's see here. I think it's process dot env dot react. Let's just go here and copy this just to make sure that we don't misspell this. To-dos. That way we can always change this in one spot. And if we deploy this, we just have to set the environment variable. Awesome. Let's create a method for getting our to-dos. Const equals load to-dos, or it's actually const load to-dos. And we'll do return fetch base URL, then response, and we'll return the response.json. Let's do another one. Const get to do, and we'll pass in an ID. Let's do a return fetch let's say base URL slash ID, then we'll do the same thing. So we'll get our response, and do response.json. Awesome. So we created two methods that allow for us to get our to-dos, all of them, and also get them by their ID. Awesome. Now that we have our services for getting our to-dos, we're actually going to create a service for creating our to-dos. So let's do an export const create to-do, and in this service, we're going to use our to-do as a parameter. Awesome. Next, we're going to return fetch, and we're going to have our base URL. We're going to have the method as post. We're going to have headers. Let's set content type. We'll set this to application JSON. And we'll have our body. So let's have that to our body will have that as JSON dot stringify. In our JSON.stringify method, we'll have a title. We'll have it to to-do.title. And we'll have completed to to-do.completed. So we have all of those properties. Next, what we'll do is then response.json, and there goes our method for creating our to-dos. Now, the same method could be used for updating our to-dos. All we have to do is copy and paste. And let's say update to-do. And this time we're going to have a template string. Let's have a base URL as well as our to-do.id. Perfect. We're going to change this method to put, and we're also going to add the property of ID. So that's our update method. Awesome. One last method we'll have is our delete to do. So const delete to do. And all we want is our ID. Let's just return fetch We'll have the base URL and to-do ID. Let's just do method delete. Then response.json. So we have our service created, and we can now start using this inside of our components. So let's start off by creating a portion of our to-do form. So this will be part one of this video. So let's start off by importing React from React. Awesome. We'll also be using some components for ant design. Let's do from ant d. I'll be using the form component, row, column, button, and input. Awesome. Then I will also be using the ant design icons. Plus circle field. So you don't have to install this package. This is already installed inside of ant design. Awesome. Next, what I'll do is create a component to do form equals, let's have this parameter here. Export default to do form. Now, because I want my on form submit to be specifically for this form, submit. So I'm going to pass this in as a prop. On form submit. This will actually be created in another file, but for now, we'll just worry about this here. And we have a onFinish function. Const onFinish. We'll have onForm submit. What we'll do is we'll pass in the title. So we'll do form.get field value. I'll have this as title. And also, completed will be false. So this will always default to false. And I just want to console.log the form get field value. and that'll be title and form dot reset fields. So let's go over what we're doing here. So from another component, we're going to pass in the function of onFormSubmit, and we're going to create the use form, get the form from the use form hook. And on this, we have our title that's being sent and completed value being set to false by default. And this would be the first portion of our component. Now, the next thing that we'll do is create a form. And in the next couple of videos, we'll go over the layout of this actual form. Okay, so we're going to finish up our form. And I made a mistake here. This is actually supposed to be return. Okay, so let's see a few things here. We're going to want to set the form property of form, the next property of on finish. We'll set this to on finish. Layout. This will be horizontal. And let's give a class name to this form and set that to do form. Awesome. And let's format this. The next thing that we're going to want to do is have a row. And we're going to use the property of gutter and set this to 20. We'll have two columns. And let's see. We'll want to choose some sizes based on the screen, but we'll set extra small to 24. We'll set small also to 24. We'll set medium to 17. We'll set large to 19. And we'll just set extra large to 20. This just changes some CSS properties on this column. Let's copy and paste this, but we'll have the numbers changed based on the size. Let's do 24, 24. We'll set this to 7, 5, and 4. We'll also create a button. And put the text of add to do. Let's also have the plus circle field in there as well. Let's put the button type. Primary HTML type. and put this as submit. We'll also have this as a block element. Cool. In the next video, we'll finish up our form item, and then we'll move on to our next couple components. In this video, we'll create our form item. So let's do form.item. And let's say here we'll have the name. Let's set this to title. And let's have some rules. Let's say required equals true. And let's have a message. This message can be this field is required. Let's save that. And also, we'll have an input with a placeholder. Let's come up with what needs to be done. So let's look over this. We have our form item. We have our button. Everything looks good. So our to-do form is finished. In this next video, we're going to create a to-do item. So in our to-do item file, we're going to do React and also use state. We're also going to import from ant.d again. Let's do a tooltip, a tag, a list, button, pop, from, and a switch. Also, from our icons, we'll have this. Let's do a close outlined as well as a check outlined. Awesome. We'll create a component. And we have our component where we'll have some props of, let's say, we pass in the to-do. We pass in on to-do removal and on to-do toggle. So we're going to pass in the data of our to-do. We're going to pass in a method for removing the to-do, as well as changing properties in the to-do. So making it complete or making it not complete. Let's also return. And what would we like to return? Let's say list item. I think this is a good type to have. A list item. And what else? I'll say, let's have some actions. Cool. Inside of these actions, we'll have a tooltip. Let's move this here. And let's format this. This can get kind of tricky. So just to get rid of some of the errors, let's actually just have the information with the to-do first and then start worrying about our actions. Let's just put a div here. Just get this out of the way. Let's have the class name as to-do item. And have a tag. Where we will display the to-do title. Inside of that tag, we'll have the color if the to-do is completed. We'll have it as cyan. Otherwise, we'll have it as red. And have the class name to-do tag. Awesome. In the next video, we'll worry about the actions that appear. What'll happen is we'll have a pop-up that allows for us to confirm some of the actions on our to-do. Now that we have our tags created, let's actually hop back to creating our actions. So inside of actions, inside of this prop, we have an array. So this array actually takes two values. One will be our tooltip. Awesome. And the next one will be a pop confirm. So let's switch over to our tooltip really quick. Let's have title. If it's to-do.completed. As completed. Awesome. So inside of that, we'll also have a switch. We'll have a few properties. Check to children, And let's have this as our next property, unchecked children. Our next property, on change. Let's have this function on to do toggle, and we will pass in our to do and default checked, and that will be to do dot completed. Awesome. So now we have our switch and our tooltip. Now in our pop confirm, we'll have a few more properties. Let's have title. Let's say something like, are you sure you want to delete? And on confirm, so what should we do with this on confirm? We'll have a function, and this function will be on to do removal, and we'll pass in our to do. Great. Now, one last thing. Inside of here, we'll have a button. Have an X. We'll have a class name. Let's set this class name to remove to do button. We have the type as, let's set this to primary, and danger. Awesome. Is there anything else we need? I think so. So remember, we'll actually be looping over these inside of our to-do list. Let's have a class name of list item, and also have a key of to-do.id. Awesome. So there we go for our to-do item. Next, we'll start going into our list and to-do tab. So in this video, we'll actually start creating our to-do tab. So let's do import React, and also use effect. Nope. From React. We'll also want to import some components from ant.d. Let's do from ant.d. Layout, row, column, and list. And also import from, let's say, to do item. Cool. So this is being aliased, even though we called this to do. This is being aliased as to do item. So const to do tab equals, we have our component, export default to do tab. There. Now we'll also take in some properties. Let's say to-dos on to-do removal and on to-do toggle. Awesome. We'll also return this. Save. And let's have a list. Actually, we don't have to have this list like that. We can just have something like this. Let's have a property of locale. Inside of this property, we'll have empty text. Let's set this text to there's nothing to do. Now, after our locale, we want to have a data source. Now, our data source will be our to-dos. We want to render the items. So let's have our to-dos. And for each one of these to-dos, we'll have our to-do item. Let's have our to-do prop. Equals the to-do on toggle and also on to-do removal. Okay, so we have our to-do, our on to-do toggle, and on to-do removal. Perfect. One last thing. Pagination. We'll have this as, let's say, position, bottom, and I'll also have page size. I'll set this to 10. Cool. So that should be perfect for our to-do tab. We have our locale, data source, render item, and our pagination. So this is going to be one of the longest, most complicated components that we're going to make so far. So let's start off by doing import from React And we're going to say, well, first of all, we want to import React. Use effect. Next, use state. And use callback. So all three of these we're going to use. Also, we're going to import int d like usual from int d. And let's say tabs, layout, row, column, input, and message. Cool. We're going to also import the TodoList.css file. So right here, I'm going to import this. Import to-do tab. Import to-do form. Let's say import from create to-do, delete to-do, load to-dos, and update to-do. Awesome. So we have those. If there's anything else we need to import, let's do const. We're going to want to take this tab pane, equals tabs, and const get the content. Awesome. So we're not done yet. We're going to have our to-do list. Okay, export default to-do list. There. After that, we're going to worry about our state. Const use state. I'm going to do this 4 times. I'm going to have the properties of refreshing, set refreshing, and the default property is false. The next one we'll use is to-dos and set to-dos. We'll set this to an empty array. Let's say we have active to-dos and set active to-dos. We'll also have completed to-dos, set completed to-dos. So let's make sure we have this, set completed to-dos and to-dos. Awesome. Next, we'll have a handle submit function. Handle, let's make sure that this is a const. Handle form submit, and we'll pass in a to-do. Do console.log, and we have our to-do to create, to-do, over to-do, and then we're going to call this method that we are going to create called onRefresh. I'm going to do a message.success. To-do added. Awesome. Cool. So let's do 2 more, and then we'll move this to another video. We'll do handle remove to-do, let's say, let's just, without console logging it, we'll do delete to-do, to-do.id, then on refresh. Message.warn, let's say to-do removed. And let's do one more. Const handle to-do. Let's do this. Handle toggle to-do status. That's a better name. We'll also pass in a to-do, like usual. And let's say to-do.completed. Okay, so to-do.completed is going to be the opposite. Let's do update to-do and have this to-do. Then on refresh, call that method. Message.info. To-do status updated. Okay, so there we go. So these are our methods for making changes to that to-do. In the next video, we'll go over refreshing our screen, and after that, we'll go for creating our layout. In this video, we're going to create our methods for refreshing our screen. So sometimes refreshing state in React can be complicated. So I'm going to create 2 methods: const refresh and another one called const on refresh. And I'll actually have this as a callback. So use callback. Cool. So let's save this. For our refresh method, let's do this. We'll call load to-dos dot. Then we'll have our JSON set to-dos and pass in that JSON. Then we'll have set active to-dos, and let's say JSON.filter to-do to-do dot completed equals false. And let's do set completed to-dos. We'll do something similar. JSON.filter, where each of our to-dos will be to-do.completed equals true. Then I'm just going to log the fact that my fetch has been completed. You can remove these later once you've tested these. Next, our callback. Now this is going to be asynchronous callback. And also, so we're going to check that it's refreshing. And we're also going to have a use effect. That monitors on refresh. So let's just do refresh. Our use effect only has to worry about our refresh. And let's do set refreshing to true. Let data equals wait load to-dos. Set to-dos equals the data. Set active to-dos equals data dot filter, where we have the to-do equals, well, each of these are looped through and you have completed. False. Set completed to-dos data dot filter And we'll set our refreshing to false. Let's say a refresh state and refresh it. So let's check this out one more time. So anytime this is called, it will just refresh everything. Cool. Okay, now that we have all of those methods set up, let's actually go to building our UI. Let's say return, and I want a layout. Cool. Let's do this class name layout. And I'll also have some content. I'll set some styles. Style. Adding, let's say 0, 50 pixels. I'll have a div. Let's say, let's call this to-do list. We'll have a row. And in that row, I'll also have a column. Let's span 14 with a offset of 5. If anybody's familiar, this column will just be 14 units and offset by 5 units. Let's have an H1 tag, and I'll say code brains to-dos. And this is where I'll have my to-do form on form submit, handle, form submit. I'll have a break, and let's check on one thing really quick in our CSS file. So I do want to talk about that. In our CSS file, let's do something like this. To-do list. I'm just going to set the margin to 24 pixels. The padding, I'll set this also to 24 pixels. And the background, let's change those. So just to get this out of the way. Let's move back onto our tabs. Tabs. We'll have our default active key equals all. Tab pane. I have 3 of these. So this tab and its key is all. Set this to active. Key all or active. Tab and let's say complete. Key complete. So the next thing we're going to do is have our to-do tab. Let's say to-dos equals to-dos on toggle equals, let's set this to, or let's do handle. Total to-do status. And let's do on to-do removal. Handle remove to-do. Let's have the same line for all of these. But we'll have this as active to-dos and complete to-dos. Let's format this. There we go. So let's check our files. We have our to-do tab, to-do list, to-do item, to-do form. The last thing we're going to want to do is go to our app.js file. So once we're inside of our app.js file, we're going to want to make sure everything appears properly here. Save that. And refresh the screen. And it's actually compiling, so this might take a while to compile. Also on your API, make sure that you have cores enabled. Also, we did make a mistake here. So we do see that in our list, we have our data, but it's not rendering. Now, this error is actually caused by not having the renderer here. We go back, now we have our to-do. Add to-do. Let's see what's going on. Can't perform a rec state update on an unmounted component. So there seems to be a memory leak. Let's see where this is. let's go back to our file. Most likely it's inside of the to-do list. Let's see here. Oh, found it pretty quick. So load to-dos. Do something. And we have our to-do. And there we go. Awesome. Let's look at our network request. Cool. Get the payload headers put, set to true. Awesome. Here's our to-do list. And one last thing, make sure to set this to an array. If you don't set any of these to array, they will not refresh properly.